Welcome to the second episode of Design Pattern module, the lecture series. So today we are going to discuss Singleton design pattern. So last week we discussed about three different types of design pattern. If I recall them, one of creational, structural, and behavioral design patterns types are there. Singleton design patterns comes under creational design pattern, design pattern type. Now, creational means how you create objects. So if you remember, if you recall your what we learned at OOP, right? You create objects. So in the creational design pattern, we look at how we create objects. So if you have a problem of creating objects, so it's a basically the creational design patterns can be used to solve your problem. Right. So now for this design pattern lecture series, you need to understand the OOP concepts. So if you recall the concepts, we discussed about classes, object, constructors, inheritance, method overriding, encapsulation, interfaces, abstraction, and polymerizer. So those were the concepts we discussed during OOP. So we need those concepts for this particular design pattern learnings as well. So remember, if you can't remember what we discussed during previously 1 year ago, you may have to go through those concepts and you may have to recall those learnings, what we did at the OOP class. Right. Singleton design pattern. Now, singleton design pattern is, as I said, it's a how you create an object. Now, this is the simplest of this design pattern, and then this enforces for you to create only one object. Now, take a pause. Think, what are the instances that you need to create a single object? Only one object, not more than that. So obviously, if you want to uh, define a cricket team, you can have only one captain, only one wicket keeper, not more than that, right? So typically what we do is, if you are not using design patterns, you make a note. We call it a memory note. You keep this in your head that we can create only one object. But what if this will okay for a small scale projects, but what if you have built a large scale code development environment and suddenly, and you have shared this code with someone else, you have handed over this code to someone else, for a new architect or someone, without knowingly he has created multiple instances. It can go wrong. So the idea of singleton design pattern is, stop users, developers create multiple objects from a single class. Now again, another classical examples are printer queues. For a given printer, you can't have multiple queues. Just imagine if you create multiple queues for a given printer. Software drivers, you can have only one driver. If you have multiple drivers, there can be conflicts. Right? So those are the instances that you can think about singleton design pattern. And there are two types of singleton design patterns. That is easy in station, that is early in station, that is when you load the time, you create the object. Now, for example, when you restart the printer queue will be created. Even if there is no one has sent a request to the printer queue will be available. Right? Lazy installation is instance will be created only when required. Mainly, lazy installations are used for large scale objects. For example, if there are gaming objects, now you know when it comes to gaming objects, your preferences, background music or whatever, they are memory intense objects. So you create them only when needed. Right. So these are the possible implementations. That is game settings, printer queues, software drivers, building automation solutions. Now, for example, if I have a one single device in a building, I want to operate only from one one object only, right? Database connection, sometimes you want to create only one database connection. You don't want your database to be overloaded with multiple connections. uh, and then system processors. Now, for example, day in process, let's say you have a uh, attendance. You can after getting the attendance, you need to do the day in process. Now, what if there are two day in processes are running simultaneously, mistakenly? One user is running the day in, whereas another one has initiated the day end. So if you have a singleton design pattern, you can't create another day end object. Salary calculations. Salary calculations can be done only by one instance. If you do two salary calculations simultaneously, it can lead to many problems. So these are the possible implementations for singleton design pattern. So how we use it? So in this singleton, so this is a possible class. If you remember, right, this is the class, this is the class, right, and this will initiate the class. So if you remember, this is a constructor, right? Remember, constructor. When you create an object, constructor is the one which is invoked, right? Again, go back to your the OOP learning, right? There we discuss about constructors, right? Constructors. And so when you create an object, constructor will execute. We can have multiple constructors, right? We can have multiple constructors depending on the parameters. There can be the different initiations of objects. Now, this is a classical implementation. No singleton. We have a public instance. You can create multiple objects. No restrictions at all. So now you go to the singleton implementation. So you can see a class, and then this one is a constructor, but it is private. If I go back to the previous one, it's a public constructor. When you have a public constructor, that means it can be accessed outside. But you have a private constructor that cannot be accessed outside. So then how are you going to create the objects? So then what you do? So you will have a static method called singleton, and what happens is when you it it will create an instance only if the unique instance is null. If it is null, you create a new object. Null means there are no objects at all, right? Up to now there are no objects. That's what it says, right? This is null means there are no objects. So if it is null, you create object, else you return the previous instance. Now, for example, if I have already have a captain object with respect to a cricket team, I can say, right, okay. And if you're trying to create it again, I will get the already created captain object. That will by restrict for the developers, not by creating another object, right? So these are additional things. So this is the implementation in C sharp. You have a main method and these are the instances. So he look at the number of instances. You keep a number of instances and then you have only singleton method. If the number of instances are greater than 1, greater than 0, greater than 1 or equal to 1, you will have new object will not be created. It will be only created when the number of instances is 0. Right. So then you need to think what are the places you can implement singleton class. I would like you to refer to your development project. Right now you have already started your development project. Think about development project where you can implement the singleton class design pattern. Sorry. Number 2, now singleton means one object. There can be situations where you can extend your singleton design pattern. That is, I can say, right, I want to have maximum 4 objects. For example, again, if I come back to the cricket example, we will have only 5 batsmen, maximum 5 batsmen. We will have maximum 5 bowlers. So it's not a pure singleton design pattern. It's an extended this singleton design pattern where you are limiting your number of objects, not to 1, but more than that. So during the class, we will be discussing the instances where you can implement pure singleton classes. And then we will be discussing we will be discussing extended singleton classes. Thank you very much.